high-end bank is the last place you'd expect to see tensions rise. But today, one woman finds herself at the center of a storm she never saw coming. Tiffany Henderson, a transgender woman with confidence in her stride, walks in expecting a simple transaction. But the weight of prejudice is about to turn an ordinary day into something far more revealing. How will this encounter unfold? Let us know in the comments below. The sharp click of heels against marble floors echoed through the grand lobby of the Regency Bank. Tiffany Henderson moved with a quiet assurance, her posture straight, her chin lifted just enough to exude confidence without arrogance. The soft hum of banking transactions filled the space, the murmuring of customers, the rhythmic tapping of keyboards, the rustling of crisp bills exchanging hands. She had been here many times before, and yet every visit felt like rolling the dice. It wasn't paranoia, it was experience. Tiffany had spent her life navigating moments like these, where the smallest flicker of discomfort in a stranger's expression, the sudden stiffness in their voice, could send a clear and unmistakable message. You are different. But she had learned how to handle it. Tiffany wasn't just a transgender woman. She was a woman who had fought for every ounce of dignity she carried. From the moment she came out in her late 20s, she had faced her share of closed doors, whispered judgments, and insincere smiles. Some places had been safe havens. Others had been reminders of how far society still had to go. She hoped today would be the former. Walking toward the customer service desk, Tiffany adjusted the designer bag hanging from her shoulder. She was dressed in a sleek navy blazer over a cream-colored blouse, tailored trousers accentuating her lean frame. Her platinum blonde hair, cut into a stylish bob, framed her sharp cheekbones, and her makeup was subtle but flawless. She looked the part of any successful businesswoman, because she was one. The young teller behind the desk glanced up, her expression polite but indifferent. "Welcome to Regency Bank. How can I assist you?" Tiffany smiled warmly, sliding a neatly organized folder onto the counter. "I need to verify a few documents before transferring some funds into my business account. I was told I'd need to speak with a manager." The teller flipped through the papers, nodding absently. "One moment." Tiffany watched as the woman tapped a few keys, her expression shifting ever so slightly as her eyes flicked to the name on the account. Tiffany Henderson. It was a micro-expression, gone in an instant, but Tiffany caught it. A moment later, the teller straightened her back, her tone just a bit cooler than before. "You'll need to speak with Mr. Randall, the branch manager. Please have a seat, and he'll be with you shortly." Tiffany exhaled through her nose. "Here we go." She knew this game, the wait, the polite brush-off, the unspoken message of, "We don't prioritize people like you." It wasn't always blatant discrimination. Sometimes it was as simple as an unnecessary delay, a little extra inconvenience, a subtle way of saying, "You don't belong here." But Tiffany had built her career on being unshakable. She was an entrepreneur, a public speaker, an advocate for the LGBT community. She had sat in boardrooms full of men who dismissed her presence, only to command their attention with a sharp wit and an undeniable intellect. So she took a seat near the window, crossed her legs, and waited. Minutes passed. Then more minutes. Tiffany checked the time. 15 minutes. The bank bustled with activity. Customers came and went. A man in an expensive gray suit walked up to the same teller Tiffany had spoken to, mentioned needing to speak to Mr. Randall, and within 2 minutes the branch manager himself emerged, shaking the man's hand like an old friend. Tiffany's fingers tightened around the strap of her purse. She uncrossed her legs, sat up straighter. 25 minutes. She cleared her throat and walked back to the teller. "Excuse me," she said, her voice measured, calm. "I've been waiting for Mr. Randall for quite some time. Is he available now?" The teller barely glanced at her. "He'll be with you as soon as he can." That was it. No apology, no acknowledgement. Tiffany's patience thinned. I just watched him come out for another customer a few minutes ago." The teller's lips pressed into a thin line. That was a different situation. Right, a different situation. A man in a suit was worth immediate attention. A transgender woman could wait indefinitely. Tiffany inhaled slowly. She wasn't going to make a scene. That was exactly what people expected, a dramatic, over-the-top reaction. But she also wasn't going to be dismissed like she was invisible. Stepping away from the counter, she pulled out her phone and typed a quick message. "Still waiting at Regency, being given the runaround. Starting to wonder if I should tweet about this." She sent it to Olivia, her closest friend, and one of the most influential LGBT journalists in the city. The response was instant. "You want me to call them?" Tiffany hesitated. She had handled worse than this. "Not yet, but stay tuned." She slid her phone back into her bag. She would give them 5 more minutes. If nothing changed, she was going to make sure everyone in that bank regretted underestimating her. Tiffany kept her posture poised, her hands clasped neatly on her lap, but inside a storm was brewing. The minutes continued to tick by, stretching into a full half-hour since she had first arrived. She had been patient. She had played by the rules. But patience had a limit. Her fingers drummed lightly against the armrest of the chair. She wasn't just sitting in a bank lobby anymore. She was sitting in a familiar, exhausting reality, one she had known for years. She had faced it as a teenager, when teachers told her she was too confused to know who she was. She had faced it in job interviews, where hiring managers hesitated just long enough to tell her she wasn't the right fit. She had faced it in countless social interactions, where some people stiffened at the sound of her voice or let their eyes linger too long on her hands, her jawline, the tiny details they were trying to dissect. She had faced it 1,000 times, and she was facing it again now. Tiffany inhaled deeply, fixing her gaze on the teller she had spoken to earlier. The woman had returned to her work, pretending not to see Tiffany, still waiting, still being ignored. A choice presented itself, one Tiffany had encountered many times. She could let it go. She could sit here in silence, let this moment pass, and simply wait until they decided she was worth acknowledging. Or she could remind them exactly who she was. Tiffany stood. She didn't rush, didn't make a show of it. She simply walked toward the counter, her heels clicking deliberately against the floor. The teller looked up, clearly surprised that Tiffany had returned. "I need to speak to Mr. Randall now," Tiffany said, her voice clear, unwavering. "I've been waiting over 30 minutes. I know for a fact that he has been available for other customers who arrived after me, so I need you to explain why I'm still sitting here." The teller's lips thinned. "I told you, ma'am, Mr. Randall will see you when he's ready." Tiffany held her gaze. "And I told you that I've been waiting for half an hour, and that I just saw him come out for someone else." "I don't make the schedule, ma'am." The slight emphasis on the word made Tiffany's stomach coil with anger. It wasn't loud. It wasn't obvious. But she had learned to hear the weight behind it. She had spent too many years being called sir in places like these, had fought too hard for the right to be recognized as the woman she was. Tiffany took a slow breath, forcing her smile to return. Polished, professional, just sharp enough to be dangerous. "Then you'd better tell someone who does make the schedule that I'm done waiting." Before the teller could respond, another voice interrupted. "Is there a problem here?" Tiffany turned. Mr. Randall had finally made an appearance. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his graying hair slicked back in a style that suggested old money and a lifetime of knowing he was in charge. He wasn't unkind-looking, but there was a coolness in his expression, one that Tiffany had seen before. It was the kind of look that wealthy men gave when they were trying to decide if you were worth their time. Tiffany lifted her chin slightly. "Yes, actually. I was told I needed to speak with you for my transaction, and I've been waiting over 30 minutes while other customers have been seen before me. I'd like to know why." Randall glanced at the teller, then back at Tiffany. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Recognition. understanding. Tiffany had seen this before, too. The quick calculation of what kind of problem is this person going to be. "Miss Henderson," he said smoothly, folding his hands in front of him, "I do apologize for the delay. We've been unusually busy today." "That's interesting," Tiffany replied, her smile still in place. "Because I just watched you come out for another customer 5 minutes ago." Randall's lips twitched slightly, but his eyes remained cold. "That was a special case." Tiffany arched a brow. "And I'm not?" For a second there was silence. A long, stretching silence. A silence that Tiffany knew well. It was the silence of people deciding how much trouble you were worth. It was the silence of men who thought they could dismiss her with a few carefully chosen words. It was the silence of a world that had tried, time and time again, to convince her that her presence was optional. Tiffany let the silence sit, let it stretch, filling the space between them. She didn't blink. She didn't back down. And for just a moment, Randall shifted. Just barely. Tiffany recognized the movement for what it was, the smallest crack in his confidence, the realization that she wasn't going to be easy to brush off. Randall exhaled through his nose. "Fine. Come with me." He turned sharply and began walking toward his office without another word. Tiffany followed, her steps measured, her posture unshaken. She passed by rows of desks where employees pretended not to notice the exchange. She passed by customers who stole curious glances at the interaction, wondering what had caused such an obvious break in routine. She passed by a world that had told her over and over that she should just sit down and wait her turn. And she walked right past it, into Randall's office, into whatever came next. Randall's office was exactly what Tiffany expected. Large, pristine, and designed to exude power. Dark mahogany furniture, a row of expensive leather chairs, and a wide glass desk that gleamed under the overhead lights. Behind him, a massive window overlooked the city, a skyline of endless possibility for the people who were allowed to access it. She had fought her whole life to be one of them. Randall gestured toward one of the chairs in front of his desk. "Have a seat." Tiffany did. She didn't thank him. He took his time settling into his chair, adjusting his cuffs, flipping through a few papers as if she weren't sitting directly in front of him. She recognized the tactic. Control the pace, let the other person fidget, make them second-guess their presence. Tiffany simply crossed her legs and waited. Finally, Randall set the papers down and looked at her. "I understand you're here regarding a business transfer?" "Yes," she replied smoothly, sliding the neatly arranged documents across the desk. "I have the necessary paperwork, identification, and proof of funds. Everything should be in order." Randall didn't pick up the documents immediately. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "I'd like to ask you a question first." Tiffany met his gaze head-on. "Of course." He studied her, as if searching for the right words. "Has this bank done something to offend you?" A slow, bitter amusement curled at the edges of Tiffany's lips. "You mean aside from making me wait nearly an hour for a meeting that should have been immediate?" Randall exhaled through his nose. "I apologize for that." "No, you don't." He blinked. Tiffany tilted her head slightly, her voice still calm, still measured. "You're not sorry, Mr. Randall. You're just trying to figure out if I'm the kind of problem that goes away quietly or the kind that makes headlines." A flicker of something passed over his face. Irritation, surprise, maybe both. Tiffany had seen it before. She had seen it in landlords who suddenly found a reason to reject her rental applications. She had seen it in doctors who hesitated just long enough to remind her that she wasn't like their other patients. She had seen it in business professionals who had no problem shaking hands with wealthy men, but somehow always forgot to follow up with her. It was the look of someone who knew exactly what they had done, but didn't think they should have to be called out for it. Randall sighed and finally picked up the papers. I assure you, Miss Henderson, there was no intentional delay in your service. She let the silence sit. Let him hear how hollow his words sounded when they were left to echo in the space between them. His eyes flicked to the paperwork in front of him, scanning it with quick efficiency. When he spoke again, his voice was more businesslike. Your business account is active, and the requested transfer is substantial. Yes. Randall tapped his fingers against the desk. And you've done business with Regency before? Multiple times. I've never had an issue until today. He nodded, but there was something in his expression that didn't sit right with her. A hesitation, a calculation. Randall set the papers down and folded his hands. I assume you understand that with transfers of this size, the bank has certain precautions? Tiffany's brow arched. I understand that you handle transactions of this size every single day, and I understand that my business has never been flagged before. Randall exhaled, shifting in his seat. Yes, well, the bank has to be thorough in its due diligence. Tiffany's patience thinned. Is there a problem, Mr. Randall? A long pause. And then Randall leaned forward, his tone quiet but firm. Some of our clients prefer discretion in their business dealings. Tiffany's stomach went cold. She knew what he was saying. Some of our clients didn't want their money associated with a transgender woman. Some of our clients didn't want their pristine, exclusive banking institution tied to someone like her. He wasn't rejecting her outright. No, that would be too obvious, too direct. He was trying to close the door quietly, trying to nudge her out just enough so that she would leave on her own. Tiffany slowly uncrossed her legs. I see. Randall offered a small, rehearsed smile. It's nothing personal. She met his gaze with an unflinching stare. It's entirely personal. Randall didn't answer. Tiffany exhaled slowly, pressing her palms against the cool leather of the chair. So let me be clear. I have followed every requirement. I have the funds, the paperwork, and the history to back this transfer. Are you denying my transaction? Randall hesitated, just for a second. Not enough for anyone else to notice. But Tiffany noticed. She could almost hear the gears turning in his mind. How much pushback will this cause? How far is she willing to take this? Finally, he sighed. Of course not. Tiffany's smile was slow and sharp. Wonderful. She stood, smoothing the front of her blazer. I'll expect the transfer to be completed today, and I assume there won't be any further delays. Randall's jaw tightened. It will be processed accordingly. She held out a hand. For a brief moment, Randall hesitated. Then, finally, reluctantly, he took it. His grip was firm, but Tiffany didn't miss the stiffness in his posture, the tension in his shoulders, the unspoken knowledge that today he had lost. She gave his hand a single, steady shake before releasing it. Pleasure doing business with you. And with that, she turned on her heel and walked out. Past the rows of desks, past the employees who had pretended not to see, and back into a world that was still learning what to do with women like her. But she already knew. She wasn't going anywhere. Tiffany walked out of Randall's office with the same confidence she had walked in with, except now there was something sharper in her stride. A victory, perhaps a small one, but a victory nonetheless. She had seen the way he looked at her, the way he weighed his options before deciding she was more trouble than she was worth. He had backed down not because he respected her, but because he feared what she could do if he refused. And that in itself was power. The hum of the bank seemed louder now. Conversations between tellers and customers, the ringing of phones, the shuffling of documents, routine noises, the kind most people took for granted. But for Tiffany, it was another reminder of just how many spaces she had walked into, where her presence alone had caused an unnatural shift in the air. She reached the waiting area where she had spent too much time earlier. A few of the customers who had been there before were gone now, replaced by others who hadn't witnessed the quiet war she had just fought behind closed doors. But the teller, the one who had made her wait, the one who... Tiffany met her gaze. For a moment, the woman's expression was unreadable. Then, with a slight turn of her head, she looked away. Not an apology, not an acknowledgement. Just avoidance? Tiffany felt a familiar ache in her chest, one she had learned to live with a long time ago. People didn't always hate you outright. Sometimes, they just wanted you to disappear. She adjusted the strap of her bag over her shoulder and walked toward the exit, keeping her head high. The cool air outside was a relief. She inhaled deeply, closing her eyes for just a second. She had done what she came to do. She had handled herself with grace. So why did she still feel this gnawing weight in her stomach? Her phone vibrated. She reached into her bag, pulling it out with steady hands. A message from Olivia. Everything good? Tiffany hesitated before typing back. It's done. She was about to put her phone away when another message popped up immediately after. That doesn't answer my question. Tiffany exhaled through her nose, a soft smile tugging at her lips. Olivia knew her too well. Before she could respond, a voice interrupted her thoughts. Excuse me, miss? Tiffany turned. A man in his early 40s stood just a few feet away, dressed in a crisp business suit. He held a leather briefcase in one hand, and his expression was polite, but there was something calculated about it. She immediately recognized him. He had been inside the bank earlier, one of the customers who had been helped quickly while she was made to wait. Yes, she said, keeping her tone even. He took a step closer. I couldn't help but notice what just happened in there. Tiffany's spine straightened. Is that so? The man nodded, tilting his head slightly. I know the look of a fight when I see one. And I know when someone's had to work twice as hard to be taken seriously. Tiffany studied him. I'm sorry, she said carefully, but who are you? The man smiled slightly, extending a hand. David Reynolds. I sit on the board of the Regency Bank. Tiffany's fingers twitched. She didn't take his hand. Not yet. She had been in too many situations where people wanted something from her. Too many conversations that started with polite interest, but ended with veiled dismissal. David seemed to pick up on her hesitation because he lowered his hand, slipping it back into his pocket. I don't mean to intrude, but I want you to know that I saw how you were treated in there. And frankly, it was unacceptable. Tiffany arched a brow. Is that so? David nodded. I won't insult you by pretending I understand what it's like. But I do know that discrimination, subtle or not, has no place in a business like this. Tiffany exhaled slowly. And yet, it happens. His jaw tightened. Yes, it does. And that's something I plan to address. Tiffany narrowed her eyes. Why are you telling me this? David let out a quiet chuckle. Because I believe in accountability, and because I want to make things right. Tiffany crossed her arms. And how exactly do you plan to do that? He hesitated for only a second before speaking. I'd like to invite you to a meeting. The next board meeting, actually. Tiffany blinked. Excuse me? David pulled a business card from his pocket, extending it toward her. Come as my guest. Share your experience. Let's have a real conversation about what needs to change. Tiffany stared at the card without taking it. There was a part of her, one that had been burned too many times, that wanted to reject the offer outright. She had learned not to put her faith in words. But there was another part of her, the part that had spent years fighting to be heard, that knew she couldn't turn away from an opportunity like this. She took the card. David's smile widened slightly. Think about it. Then, with a polite nod, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the city crowd. Tiffany stared down at the card in her hand. An invitation. A chance. And a decision she wasn't sure she was ready to make. Tiffany had spent years walking into rooms where she wasn't wanted. She had sat across from people who smiled through gritted teeth, their minds already made up about her before she even spoke. She had shaken hands with men who would rather pretend she didn't exist. And yet she still walked into every one of those rooms. Because she had learned long ago that the only way to be heard was to refuse to stay silent. That was what brought her here, standing in front of the towering Regency Bank headquarters, clutching the business card that had been burning a hole in her purse for days. David Reynolds had given her an invitation to speak at the bank's board meeting, to tell them to their faces exactly what had happened inside their institution, to lay it all out in the open. The old Tiffany, the one who had spent years shrinking herself, making herself small to avoid conflict, might have ignored the offer. But she wasn't that woman anymore. She adjusted the lapels of her blazer, took a breath, and stepped inside. The receptionist at the front desk barely glanced up as she walked past, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Tiffany didn't need directions. She had already researched where the boardroom was, memorized the layout of the building. She wasn't coming in as someone they could brush off. She was coming in prepared. When she reached the double doors of the boardroom, she paused for only a second before pushing them open. The conversation inside came to an abrupt halt. 12 people sat around a long, polished mahogany table, their crisp suits and composed expressions a perfect display of corporate detachment. At the head of the table sat Randall, his jaw tightening ever so slightly when he saw her. David Reynolds, seated a few chairs down, was the only one who smiled. "Tiffany," he said, gesturing to the empty seat beside him, "glad you could make it." Tiffany inclined her head, taking her seat. She placed her purse carefully on the table, her every movement controlled, deliberate. The chair was comfortable, but Tiffany was no fool. Just because she had a seat at the table didn't mean she was welcome. Randall cleared his throat. "Miss Henderson, I understand that David invited you here, but I must say, I'm not sure what purpose this serves." Tiffany met his gaze. "I believe the purpose is quite clear." Randall sighed. "If you're under the impression that your experience at our branch was discriminatory," Tiffany finished for him, "it was, and we both know it." A few board members shifted in their seats. Randall's smile was tight, controlled. "With all due respect, our institution serves a diverse range of clients. Regency Bank has always been committed to inclusion, and—" "Inclusion?" Tiffany let out a quiet, humorless laugh. "Is that what you call it? Making transgender customers wait longer than others? Giving them the runaround? Trying to quietly push them out the door?" A younger woman seated across from her frowned. "Miss Henderson, are you suggesting that Regency Bank engages in—" "Yes." Tiffany didn't hesitate. "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm telling you from personal experience that it happens, and not just to me, to others like me, to people who don't fit the image you want in your bank." Silence. David leaned forward, his expression serious now. "I asked Tiffany here because I believe this is a conversation we need to have. Whether or not you personally witnessed what happened, the fact remains that a valued client was made to feel unwelcome. That is not acceptable." Randall's lips pressed together. "David, with all due respect—" "All due respect," David interrupted, his voice calm but firm, "we can't sit here and pretend this isn't happening." A man at the end of the table cleared his throat. "And what exactly do you propose we do about it?" Tiffany tilted her head. "You could start by holding your employees accountable." More shifting. She wasn't just making them uncomfortable. She was forcing them to acknowledge something they had likely spent years ignoring. She leaned forward slightly, her voice steady. "You talk about inclusion, but inclusion isn't just a word you put on your website. It's about actions. It's about policies. It's about making sure people like me don't have to fight just to be treated like everyone else." Randall exhaled, rubbing his temple. "And if you're implying that we have staff members who—" "I'm not implying anything," Tiffany said coolly. "I'm stating a fact. If you don't believe me, feel free to review security footage from that day. You'll see exactly how long I was made to wait. You'll see exactly how other customers were prioritized over me. And if you still want to pretend it was a coincidence, then I suggest you ask yourselves why it keeps happening to people like me." More silence. David glanced around the room. "I think we all know she's right." Randall's fingers tightened into a fist, but he said nothing. Tiffany sat back, smoothing an invisible wrinkle from her blouse. "I don't expect immediate change. I don't expect overnight fixes. But I do expect acknowledgement, and I do expect action." A man near the center of the table nodded slowly. "You want more than just an apology." Tiffany's smile was sharp. "Apologies don't change systems. Policies do." She let the weight of her words settle over the room. Finally, after a long moment, Randall exhaled through his nose. "We'll review our policies." Tiffany arched a brow. David smirked slightly. "What he means is, we'll be taking a very serious look at how our branches are run, and we'll be making changes." Tiffany studied Randall's face, searching for resistance, but this time she didn't see it. He knew he had lost. She nodded once. "Good." David smiled. "Ms. Henderson, thank you for your time today. We'll be in touch." Tiffany stood, gathering her purse. As she walked toward the door, she paused, glancing back at the table of executives. "I look forward to seeing those changes." And with that, she walked out. She had spent years walking into rooms where she wasn't wanted. Now, for the first time, she was walking out, knowing that the door behind her would never close the same way again. Tiffany stepped out of the towering glass doors of Regency Bank headquarters, feeling the warmth of the late afternoon sun on her skin. The city hummed around her. Car horns blaring in the distance, hurried footsteps of pedestrians weaving through the sidewalks, the ever-present rhythm of a world that never slowed down. And yet, for the first time in a long while, Tiffany allowed herself to. She let the moment settle in her chest, the weight of everything that had just happened sinking in. For years she had walked into battles like this one. Some she had won, others had left scars, but today was different. Today she had forced them to listen. Her phone vibrated. She pulled it out of her bag, expecting another message from Olivia, but instead she saw an email notification. Subject: Regency Board Statement. She opened it. "Miss Henderson, following today's discussion, we will be implementing new diversity and inclusion policies across all Regency Bank branches. This includes mandatory staff training on equitable customer service and internal audits to ensure no customer experiences discrimination based on gender identity or any other protected status. We appreciate your willingness to bring this to our attention and look forward to maintaining your trust as a valued client." This. David Reynolds. Tiffany stared at the screen for a moment. Then, slowly, she smiled. It wasn't just a generic PR response. It was action. It was real. She had spent so many years being told she was asking for too much, that she was being too sensitive, that the world wasn't built for people like her, and she just had to deal with it. But today she had proved something, not just to the bank, but to herself. She was no longer just someone asking for change. She was someone making it. A familiar voice pulled her from her thoughts. "Tip." She looked up just as Olivia jogged toward her, dressed in an effortlessly stylish pantsuit, her curls bouncing with every step. Tiffany pocketed her phone just as Olivia reached her, immediately pulling her into a hug. "I knew it," Olivia said, squeezing her tight. "I knew you were going to shake things up in there." Tiffany laughed, the tension in her body finally loosening. "It went, well?" Olivia pulled back, scanning Tiffany's face with a knowing look. "That's an understatement." Tiffany exhaled, her gaze drifting back to the towering building behind her. "They're changing policies." Olivia's brows lifted. "Seriously?" Tiffany nodded. "Training, audits, accountability." Olivia whistled. "Damn, you didn't just win, you left a mark." Tiffany's smile grew, but there was something else in her expression, something softer, something more reflective. "It's not just about me," she murmured. Olivia studied her. "I know." Tiffany crossed her arms, looking out at the city. "I spent so much of my life just trying to be seen, trying to exist in spaces that weren't made for me, and even when I got in, I always felt like I was waiting for someone to pull the rug out from under me." Olivia was silent, letting her talk. But today wasn't just about getting through the door. It was about making sure it stayed open for the next person who walks in. Olivia smiled. "And that's why you're unstoppable." Tiffany shook her head. But she was smiling too. She had spent so much time believing that survival was enough, that as long as she kept her head high, as long as she didn't let the world break her, that was victory in itself. But now she knew better. Survival wasn't the goal. Thriving was. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was another email, one from a national LGBTQ advocacy group. Subject: speaking opportunity, let's talk. Tiffany blinked. Olivia leaned over her shoulder, reading the preview. "Oh, now they're paying attention." Tiffany chuckled, shaking her head. "Guess so." Olivia nudged her. "And?" Tiffany took a breath. Then, without hesitation, she opened the email. She wasn't done. Not even close. She had a voice. And now the world was finally listening.